Friends, tonight we're gonna make an old German house from this block of styrofoam, so let's get right into it. But first, we need a plan. This plan, which I quickly sketched in Photoshop. It'll act as our guide for the initial cutting. Speaking of which, when working with foam, a hot wire cutter is the best tool you can have. This one is Proxon Thermocut and it's hands down one of the best investments I've done in this hobby. You can make some pretty intricate and detailed cuts with it, as long as your foam blocks aren't too big. Okay, so we have the opening for the barn door. What's next? Yeah, the windows. Here I find it easier to work with more standard tools, and again, the plan will save us a lot of time. Depending on the thickness of your miniature building, you've got two options. You can remove the foam completely, or you can slowly gouge it out with pliers. The insides are gonna be black anyway, so I'm not too bothered with the finish. And lastly, I made this thin strip which will act as a brick foundation, according to my reference images. Simply glue it in place with PVA glue and we're done with this stage. Okay, so now we have the basic shapes laid out, so what should we do next? I guess the tedious part, bricks. I mean, the process is oh so simple, but it takes a while to get it done properly. 2.5mm for their height, 9mm for their length, and when you have half bricks, it's 4mm. Next we have to enlarge the brick lines and sort of sculpt their shape. There are many ways to do this, but recently I've been enjoying a sharpened pencil as my sculpting tool because it works really smoothly. One of the tricks you've been recommending in my previous videos was a crumpled ball of aluminum foil for that rough, gnarly texture, and it's one of the most goated techniques out there. However, I've never been impressed by the porous quality of the styrofoam, no matter how smooth it was, but luckily, you can seal it pretty tight. Previously, I used undiluted Tamiya acrylic paints for the job, but these new VMS primers are purely acrylic, which means they won't attack the foam and they'll seal it much quicker. With paints, I had to use 4 to 5 layers, but with this, 1 is enough. 2 are absolute perfection. The bricks often have these sharp, jagged edges after I treat them with the pencil. That's just the foam being stubborn, so I try to hide them as best as I can, and with that, the brick portion of the house is done. Next up, the parts with peeling plaster. I drawn their shapes on my plan according to the photos, and then simply transferred them on the building using pressure. They might not be well visible, so another pass might be necessary, but once we have them established, we can add the remaining skeleton of the building without wasting time on areas that are gonna be hidden. The rest of the house seems to have been built from clay bricks or foamed concrete breeze blocks. Either way, they're always bigger than standard heat-treated bricks, and it's a nice contrast. In fact, texturing the foam and sealing it with primer is so much fun that I did it on the invisible parts as well, simply because I enjoyed the process. With this out of the way, let's treat the backside of the house. This one won't go into a picture frame, but a diorama, and that means people might see it from the other side on a model show or somewhere, and I'd be very embarrassed if they saw a nasty styrofoam surface from behind. I believe that presentation is a huge part of the overall impression, so even though I don't enjoy this process, I always make sure that my dioramas or their buildings are nicely laminated with thin oak veneer. Here I ran into some issues because I made a bad cut, so I had to fill a gap on the brick side of the building. In other words, the worst side for a problem like this. Let me tell you, sculpting bricks out of styrofoam is a nice experience, but trying to do the same with putty and carving tools and trying to match the result to what I already had made, not so much. But it's a small price to pay for a spotless presentation, I can tell you that much. Okay, let's continue with something fun, adding the mortar between the bricks. For this, there are again many mediums and techniques and I tried a lot of them. But I actually found that acrylic snow paste from AK might be the best thing for the job. It was when I was sculpting my first commercially available facade for RT diorama, link in the description, when I tried it and was blown away by the texture. Here I had a bigger house to work on, so I didn't put as much care into the effect, but the process was the same. Work it into the gaps and texture it with an old toothbrush. Make sure to work in small sections because the snow can start drying pretty quickly. This can be done before or after you paint the bricks. Let's now make the damaged plaster, which is really fun. I wanted the cracks to match my reference images as closely as possible, so I made some quick masks from Tamiya tape. For the plaster, I used acrylic wood putty from a hardware store and a plastic spatula which comes from a photo etch bending tool. I like the process because it's pretty much the same as in real life, but instead of a trowel, you're using a small plastic spatula. Because of that, I don't like to avoid the resulting texture. I embrace it. If you try this, don't attempt to get it done in one layer. I went over the surface multiple times in small patches until I had enough texture and different layers. It also helps to cover up the invisible brick lines which like to suck the putty in, leaving visible indentations in the surface which are not cool. Once it was fully dry, I removed the tape and check out the dry mortar flying off just like in real life. Some gentle sanding with a carpenter sponge will level out the gnarly surface, and then we can make the cracked edges more realistic by gently attacking them with a hobby blade or a dentist tool. Also, the house is gonna be situated in a World War II diorama, and in historical images, we can see quite a lot of bullet holes in it. These are easily done with a sharp needle, and I must commend this absolutely fantastic scribing needle from Steady Tools. Let's just say that adding realistic cracks used to be a pretty tedious job for me, but now it's so chill and super fun. Alright, now we have that out of the way, so let's now make some wooden details. And I'll start by cheating because the first major parts are the windows, and here I opted for 3D printing. These are my own designs, and they're available on my Patreon if you're interested. The cool thing is, they can be stretched or squeezed in the slicer software according to your needs. I designed them to fit exactly into my building, but that's not an issue. Okay, serious wood time ahead. The barn doors and any other wooden parts were made from evergreen styrene. The planks were scribed into the plastic with a Tamiya scriber, which is a very efficient method, and the wood grain was added with the metal wire brush. This is hands down the best method for replicating wood, because unlike the real material, you can adjust the size and intensity of the grain to your needs, and it just looks more realistic, not to mention how easy it is to paint. The only major details on these parts were holes for nails, and a few 3D printed pieces from RT diorama such as the door handles. For the roof, I made a cardboard template that fits the building precisely. This is where we'll glue the roof tiles, but first I had to make some simplified beams underneath. Once again, using textured plastic, I chopped them to size and pressed them into the foam with a bit of PVA glue. Not much else is gonna be visible here, but it greatly enhances the realism of the whole thing. The individual roof tiles are also available on my Patreon, and I printed way too many of them, but at least I have hundreds of spares for future buildings. I printed them on my new 16K Elegoo Saturn IV Ultra, and the increased resolution is really noticeable. I printed these in the past on my older printers and you could always see the pixels, but not this time. I actually have an affiliate link for Elegoo down in the description, and you don't have to buy the whole printer, it applies to everything. I recently bought large bottles of resin because I like printing anything and everything, and the delivery times were really fast. It might seem like a tedious job, and yeah, it is. But it doesn't take as much time as I was expecting. It's actually a pretty chill process. Thanks to the cardboard template, I can now cut them to the exact shape using a rotary tool. Of course, this is an extremely messy job with a lot of resin dust in the air, so make sure to wear your mop gear. Okay, now I could glue it to the house, but if you thought this was the nasty part, I have some bad news for you. The veneer has to be shaped according to the wavy pattern, all the while making sure the tiles won't get damaged. The rotary tool is actually great for this. I wouldn't be able to pull this off without it. But hey, gaps are unavoidable, and that means filling. with wood putty. And when there's filling, there's also sanding, and this is no easy task either. The roof is just a gift that keeps on giving. Because hey, I found some additional missing tiles which I had to add, and that meant more cutting and even more filling, this time from behind. I'm willing to go to extreme lengths when it comes to neat presentation. Finally, I stippled the roof with diluted Tamiya putty for some nice texture, but mainly to even out the resin pieces and the wood putty. Alright, that was a lot, wasn't it? So let's wrap up the construction. I bet you're eager to start painting, and so am I. So I'll just quickly finish these window shutters, again built exactly according to my references, and I built these with working hinges. Not to flex my scratch building skills, but to make them removable and easier to paint. And with that, we turned a single block of foam into an authentic looking miniature country house. So let's give it some life now. And we'll start with priming. I know that 3 different primers might seem excessive, but hear me out. I needed deep shadows in some areas, especially under the roof tiles, so it was an obvious choice, right? The light gray primer is the absolute best option for the whole structure. It just gives it that nice neutral look of a 3D render and makes every detail pop, especially the border. And lastly, for wood, we need a flat white surface, so again, obvious choice. Let's now admire it for a second because this clean, unified finish is always a sight to behold. Okay, and now we'll mess it up with acrylics. I'll start with the plaster because this is the messiest job of them all, as everything is applied with large sponges for maximum variation and visual texture. We can use whatever paints we want, it all depends on the finish we're after, and in this case, my goal was a clay-like plaster that I photographed on an old house built from clay bricks. We don't have to start with the darkest and end with the lightest colors either. Our goal is variation, not light gradients. And also, even though it's tempting to refine the effect, we don't have to waste too much time on it. So let's wash it. These 2 washes have very nice, neutral colors, so they'll give it a more grayish look while also unifying the different tones a little and adding shadows and volumes around those fine details. Overall, just an ideal base for the chipping effects. Speaking of which, once everything was dry, I gave it a very generous coat of VMS chipping fluid. Old houses were often painted with a whitewash, so that's what we're going to do here. Again, every paint will be applied with sponges for that nice textured finish, and of course, the chipping fluid must be completely dry. By the way, all of these VMS and AK products can be bought through affiliate links in the description, and what's even better, you'll find discount codes there as well, so you can stock up on some good stuff and also save money and help me out as well. Now, one disadvantage of sponge-applied water-based acrylics is that the chipping is anything but delicate. It's nowhere near to what we're often achieving on our armor models with this technique combined with an airbrush. But luckily, that's not even the point here. Paint on houses always comes down in large sheets, and this method replicates that effect perfectly. Also, the thickness and intensity of the paint layer has an impact on how easily we can remove the paint. Thinner layers mean easier chipping, so we can use that to our advantage in those areas with lots of wear. In my inspirational folder, I found a small patch of blue color on the wall, so I covered this area with more chipping fluid, applied the paint, and chipped it carefully down without reactivating the previous layer. Now I went over the surface with the same enamel washes. Dark sepia is almost black, but not entirely. It's like a very dark gray. This one goes into every crack, bullet hole, and other deep parts of the texture. Wash for interiors, on the other hand, is this dirty gray color that's slightly warm, and I applied it in controlled amounts over the entire wall, bringing out those delicate textures created by the rough application. Finally, I go over the edges with off-white acrylic and a fine, pointy paintbrush. This process refines the entire job and also adds more contrast and 3D appearance to all those delicate features. And that's it for the plaster. It was a lot of steps, but it was actually super fast. Let's now paint the cinder blocks. This will be even faster because we only need a few different tones, and once again, we'll apply them with a sponge for maximum texture and variety. There's no rhyme or reason, I just recommend using warm tones and look up some references. To finish them up, for now, I applied the dark sepia enamel wash into the mortar lines. They don't look so bad, right? Much better than messing around with brushes and fancy highlights. Let's now paint the bricks. And you know what? I'm kinda in a spongy mood, so I'll paint them with sponges as well. The method is surprisingly fast, and because we're depositing only small amounts of paint, the drying time is quick as well. Not to mention we have all that beautiful and gritty color variation going on. Of course, the color choice depends on the finish, and what I saw on Google Street View in the real-life German village were bricks that were usually rather dark in color. It's not the first time I saw that, maybe it's some kind of German thing. Let me know if you have more insights into it. You might have noticed that the process is pretty much the same as with the cinder blocks, but when we're applying the dark wash, we have to pay attention and make sure to wipe the excess from the bricks, otherwise they'll look all stainy, dark and ugly. However, I didn't want to stop here, so once the wash was dry, I covered the surface with chipping fluid and applied deck tan acrylic with a sponge. This will represent mortar, because oftentimes bricks get kinda dirty. The mortar can spill from the gaps, or the builders can use a bunch of recycled bricks from older buildings. It's a pretty common sight, and what's the most important for us, after we do the whole chipping procedure, the effect looks absolutely fantastic and even makes the brick wall look lighter. And once this is done, we can paint the mortar between them. The dark wash wasn't applied just for fun, it helps us to achieve a beautiful 3D look. In real life, it's never applied perfectly unless the builders go over it and apply some meticulous grouting. This might look like another time-consuming method, but I actually find it quicker and easier to control than painting the bricks first and then applying the acrylic paste acting as mortar. And just like that, we have another major and very important part of the house finished. I can't decide what I enjoyed more so far, painting the damaged plaster or the bricks and cinder blocks. Let's now paint the roof, and this is the only part I wasn't looking forward to because the wavy surface makes it impossible to paint the tiles with a sponge. So ultimately, I opted for stippling with an old brush for the first layer, and everything else was applied as speckling. I used the same colors as on the bricks. At first, I considered some cement tiles with a grayish finish, but I think this will look more striking. It's important to combine dark and light dusty tones for a nice weathered look. Roofs are the most exposed surfaces that get absolutely obliterated by the elements, so even though I'm using the same colors, the finish is quite different compared to the brick wall. I could have pushed the special effects much further, but I wanted to get this part done quickly, so I simply tied it all together with a dark sepia wash and called it quits. So that's the main body of the house finished. But what's that in the background? Do you see that? Hold on. Oh yeah, faded wood. Let's take a look at how we can turn this flat white finish into this weathered wooden base coat with tons of contrast. If you saw my previous architectural videos, you'll probably say that it's all about oil paints, but not this time. We'll use enamels and acrylic inks. I just wanted to try a different medium and see what finish it creates compared to my usual oil paint and acrylic wash method. Well, for starters, enamels are quicker to apply and they blend better because they're pre-thinned and ready to use. By the way, there are no fancy colors here, just stuff I normally use for tanks and I thought it could work for wood as well. Also, enamels dry quicker, so that can be a plus as well. The process is otherwise the same. You apply those large messy stains and blend them in the direction of the wood grain using a large flat brush. We can control how light or dark the finish will be, But here I found that lighter is better, because we can always make it darker with inks. I started with the obvious stuff, applying the black ink between the individual planks. It's basically just an acrylic pin wash. But then, it was about having fun with various stains, shadows, and other interesting effects. Pure grime from the Wargame series has a grayish-brown tone and flows much better than the ink because it's a contrast paint. Also, it dries fast and the finish is perfectly flat. Inks, when applied in thicker layers, dry into a glossy finish. But this isn't the magical part, although it's pretty exciting already. The real magic comes once we're done with it. Now we take enamel thinner and carefully attack the surface with it. Because the enamel paint underneath isn't fully cured yet, the thinner will reactivate it. But because there's a thin acrylic crust on top of it, it won't start blending, but instead creating these awesome chips and worn effects, exposing the white primer. This way, we can quickly add texture and adjust the tone of the wood. Generally, it makes the planks look lighter and more grayish. This is an absolute game changer for me, and I figured it out by accident. Then we can go back and add more acrylic effects, adjusting the contrast or toning down some of the white chipping. And once this was done, I quickly base coated the metal parts in a dark, rusty color. Now I'll show you that this is just a base coat for even more exciting stuff. Painted wood with tons of wear. I gave the surface a generous coat of VMS chipping fluid, and once it was completely dry, I applied various green tones on the individual planks. The goal here is to achieve a lively, colorful finish with various faded green tones. This is so much fun, I can tell you that, and in fact, wooden surfaces are, in my opinion, the most exciting parts to work on, period. Check out how we can add more variation and interest just by dry brushing the textured surface with lighter colors. But the real fun begins once we start chipping it down. Remember how I said that these paints combined with the brushed on chipping fluid lead to large patches of peeling paint? That's what we're gonna use to our fullest advantage here, because that's exactly how paint peels from wooden planks in real life. The wood grain texture helps us with that as well, and if possible, we should try to max the contrast as much as we can. I didn't do it on this example because I only learned it afterward, but basically, if you have a dark plank, paint it with a light color, and if it's pale, add darker color so the contrast is stronger. Once the chipping was done, I again enhanced the shadows with a dark sepia wash. I made sure to apply it rather tight, without affecting the planks or the wood grain texture, just the gaps between them. I didn't pay attention to this in the past, and the results were always kinda toned down in the end. Rust is another exciting effect on wooden textures, and I like to apply it around nail holes and every metallic surface, be it hinges, handles, you name it. While I'm working on this, let me give you a final shout out to a couple of very personal sites. The first one being my own personal webpage with a portfolio of my models. Most of them are for sale, and there's only a few left since I started this small side project of mine, and once I finish this diorama, it'll be there as well. The second is Plastic Invasion, who's my neighbor from Czech Republic, and we're making merch together. So if you want some night shift drip in your wardrobe, please check it out. Okay, so the final touch is to sharpen the details with a pointy brush and deck tan acrylic paint. This should be applied very sparingly, otherwise the surface will receive that unnatural, frosted over appearance. Our goal is just to pick out the edges and enhance the aged look. One would argue that this looks too old for a lived-in house, but most of these buildings were built in the late 1800s, so during World War II they were over 60 years old. And if the owners didn't do any renovations, this looks about right. I don't know why, but finished barn doors are small art pieces to me, and I love looking at them like this, out of context. But hey, now we can glue them in place, and seeing them as a part of the house gives them a whole new dimension. So let's quickly finish the remaining details. The windows were painted using the same exact techniques, and before I glued them in place, I added some streaking underneath them. It's just a way to visually integrate them into the surface while adding some contrast and weathering at the same time. The final detail I added was a small wall anchor from RT diorama, painted with sponges and acrylics, and some oil paint rust washes. This is just another opportunity to add something interesting to the wall, and an excuse to paint additional streaking effects, this time with a rusty color. And with that out of the way, my mission was over. Alright, my friends, it's been a while since I made a large building for a diorama. The last one being the watermill, if I remember correctly, and that was like 2 years ago, right? I don't have any fancy way to show you the building from all angles, so let's just switch to these photographs. The techniques I use nowadays have drastically changed compared to all my previous miniature buildings, and it's all because I started making those facades that go into picture frames. I think the more realistic approach to these models is a huge plus, and I can't wait to see how it'll look in the diorama once the terrain is there as well, and the scene is accompanied by the destroyed Sturmtiger and the Jeep driving around it. That's gonna be the next video, and after that, this massive project will be finally done. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful or interesting. I wouldn't be able to run my channel full time without my patrons. Their help allows me to walk around my village and take pictures of private property as a part of my job, and if you're one of them, thank you so much, because if it weren't for you, I definitely wouldn't be making these videos for a living. My Patreon is honestly the best place, where only the coolest kids and humans come to hang out. I post regular updates, share work in progress photos, thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we keep in touch through DMs, comments, and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos completely ad-free, and they stay there forever. So if you like listening to them while you're modeling, now you know where to go. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your models, reference photos from real-life locations, and high-res studio shots of all of my models that show way more detail than video ever could. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. The finished diorama will be the most ambitious project I've ever done, and I didn't even realize it when I was starting out in the summer. So, fingers crossed everything will work out in the end. And remember, build your models, don't just hoard them. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!